What is going on, everybody? Today is the 2022 NBA Draft, and I figured for tonight's occasion, why not make a mock draft here for YouTube? So that is exactly what we are going to do. This mock draft is going to be a full two-rounder. We're going to go over every single pick, all 58 of them. It's not 60 this year because a couple second-round picks ended up being forfeited. Since this is my only NBA draft-related video on YouTube, I'm sort of combining this mock draft with my own personal player rankings. So although this mock draft is me trying to predict what will happen, I'm also going to be talking about my own player rankings for all of these guys as well. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So the number one overall pick has been a major topic of discussion throughout this entire draft season because there has been no clear selection. However, within the past couple of days, it's been made pretty clear that Auburn forward Jabari Smith Jr. is the leading candidate for that selection, and it would be a major surprise at this point if the Orlando Magic do not pick him number one. I have Smith as my number 5 overall player in the class. That is a lower ranking than you are going to see from everybody. So let me tell you why I think Jabari Smith here at 1 is actually the wrong pick for the Orlando Magic. And it's not that I think he's a bad player. I do not think he's going to be a bust at all, but I don't see the ceiling with him that you hope for on a number 1 overall pick. I understand the angle you want to make that he might be a perfect on-court fit for the Magic, which he does bring that defensive versatility that they really like. And this is not a swing for the fences. This is a guy who is going to be a good player, but I don't see him as a number 1 or maybe even a number 2 option on a championship team. And I think when you look at the Magic, they have a lot of good pieces going forward, but they don't have anybody who I see as a possible superstar. So I would rather see them take the big swing on a guy like Chet Holmgren, Paolo Banchero, or even Jaden Ivey. I think it's more of a sure thing that Smith is going to be a good player compared to those 3 guys, but I think the Magic already have a lot of guys who I'm confident are going to be good players in the future, but not great ones. Jabari Smith, if you look at his game, he's a very versatile piece on both offense and defense. He's got a very perimeter-oriented game on offense. He's a great shooter, but he doesn't really create his own shot all that well, which, again, you really look for one of your top offensive options. Smith shot the ball extremely efficiently from 3 last year. We'll have to see if that can carry over to the NBA, and he's not a phenomenal playmaker either, so he can't really create for himself all that well or others, which is kind of a big deal breaker for me, even though he is a good shooter and he really gives you what you want on defense as a 6'10" versatile forward who can play inside and out. Again, I think there's plenty of reason to believe that Jabari Smith's going to be a very good player in the NBA, but I don't see all-star with him. I just see very, very good role player, which is fine, but I don't know if you want that with the number 1 pick, especially for a team like the Magic, who I think should take a big swing. The Oklahoma City Thunder at 2, it seems like a sure thing. They'll go with Gonzaga big man Chet Holmgren. Holmgren is a very skilled player with a unicorn type of skill set. On defense, he is a tenacious shot blocker with his unbelievable length. Obviously, his frame is not ideal. I know it's kind of beating a dead horse. That's his big weakness, but the fact of the matter is he's going to have to bulk up as he takes on bigger NBA centers in the future. Holmgren also has the ability to switch onto the perimeter defensively as well, which certainly gives him some value versatility-wise. And then on offense, he can handle the ball, he can pass, he can shoot. He needs to be a little bit more polished on offense, but he has the skills that you don't really see in many 7-footers too often. And I think he's a perfect fit in Oklahoma City, a team that wants to play positionless basketball. The Thunder have so many picks over the next few years, so why not take a shot on the guy who arguably has a higher ceiling than anybody in this draft class? The Houston Rockets at 3 select Paolo Banchero out of Duke. This is who I think the Magic should select number 1 overall. Banchero's game is not as polished as Jabari Smith. Banchero, I don't think, is quite the athlete that Smith is. He has a similar frame at around 6'10", a little bit bulkier and stronger right now than Jabari Smith. Banchero certainly is not the defensive player that Smith is, which is certainly a big deal, especially considering a team like the Houston Rockets. They don't have a ton on defense. They have plenty of offensive minded players and guys who can really score the basketball at a high level. But I do think they should look to prioritize defense. However, with Smith and Holmgren gone, I can't fault them here with selecting Paolo Banchero, who I think does a great job of creating for himself and others off the dribble in transition. He can handle the ball. He can space the floor, although he's a little bit inconsistent as a shooter at the moment. So I think he does have some work to do, but of these top three guys, for most people, Smith, Holmgren, and Banchero, I think Banchero is the best prospect of the group, and I think this will be a good pick for the Rockets. It seems like these top three picks are pretty much set in stone. It's definitely going to be those three players in the top three, and it definitely seems like that's the order they'll go in. So at 4, this is the most important pick in the draft, held by the Sacramento Kings. It will dictate the flow and the pace of the rest of this draft because it's not clear who's going to go here. I am predicting that the Kings will not pick here at 4. I think somebody is going to move up for Jaden Ivey, whether that's the Knicks, the Hawks, the Thunder, the Pacers, the Pistons, or maybe a surprise team in there. However, I'm not doing any trades today, and with the scenario that there won't be any trades, if the Kings were to stay here at 4, I don't think they would pick Jaden Ivey. I think they really like Keegan Murray out of Iowa to be the selection. I have Murray as my 8th ranked player in the class. I'm not as high on him as others, but he is certainly a very high floor player who had a great sophomore season with the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's a versatile offensive weapon who really showed a lot of improvement last year as a scorer. He's 6'8", which I think makes him a little bit of a tweener. He doesn't really have the size and length to defend down low, but he doesn't really have the quickness to defend on the perimeter. I would say that's my big worry with him as of now. But I think a front court of him and Domantas Sabonis could be quite interesting, and I know the Kings do really, really like him, whereas with Jaden Ivey, he's not a great fit with De'Aaron Fox. Jaden Ivey's camp has made it clear they do not want to go to Sacramento. So if the Kings keep this pick, I think it'll be Keegan Murray, but I think chances are somebody moves up for Jaden Ivey. If somebody doesn't move up for Ivey, he will fall right into the laps of my favorite team, the Detroit Pistons. You got to run this card up, and you're probably saying, oh, Octi, you're being biased. You gave the Pistons your number 1 player in the class. Yes, I understand that may come off as biased. However, I just have a weird gut feeling that we're going to end up with Jaden Ivey, and I really, really hope that I'm right. I think him and Cade Cunningham could be the perfect backcourt fit because both of them have the ability to play on and off the ball. Jaden Ivey, even though he's my number 1 prospect in this draft, most years he certainly would not be my number 1 guy. Last year, he probably would have been like 5th on my board, which I think is more so because the top of the class this year is a lot worse, in my opinion, than last year. But Jaden Ivey, if you look at his game, he's a fantastic athlete. He will zip down the floor, and with his head down, driving to the basket, you cannot stop him. He has shown improvements as a perimeter shooter, but he still has a lot of work to do there. He doesn't really have a mid-range game, and he really only drives to the basket with his right hand. So that's certainly something that could look to be improved upon defensively as well. He is not the greatest, but I think if you look at his athleticism, his upside, and players who are similarly profiled who have entered the league in recent years, most of those guys have panned out. So I see no reason that Jaden Ivey won't pan out at the next level, and I think with Detroit, that's about as good of a fit as you can get. So please, please happen. I'm really hoping. The Indiana Pacers at 6, I think this would be the first real surprise pick for some people. They go with Dyson Daniels, combo guard from G League Ignite. I'm very high on Daniels personally. I have him as my number 4 player in the class over the likes of guys like Jabari Smith. Dyson Daniels is listed at 6'6", but reportedly he's at a growth spurt. He might be as high as 6'8". He has the ability of a point guard, but the length of a wing. He's somebody who's a high floor player and really makes smart winning plays. Very high basketball IQ for someone of his age. Yet with that high floor, I think there's a high ceiling. Somebody with his playmaking and defensive ability at his size and athleticism, there's a lot to like there. He's not a consistent scorer or shooter at all, but the rest of his game is really, really good. I think him and Tyrese Halliburton would be a really good backcourt pairing. So I love this pick for Indiana. Again, I don't think a lot of people are expecting this one, but assuming the top 5 does play out like this, I think Dyson Daniels should be the pick for the Pacers. The Portland Trailblazers here at 7 are another team who I could see moving out of this selection for a proven player. They've been heavily linked to OG Anunoby of the Toronto Raptors, and if they keep it, there is a shot they may prefer more of an NBA-ready guy like a Benedict Mathurin, a Johnny Davis, somebody like that. Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor could be a surprise pick here. But the upside with Shaedon Sharpe might be too much to pass up. Sharpe did not play a single minute of basketball at the University of Kentucky, and the highest level he's played is high school ball, which is why he is such a polarizing and risky pick, which makes the floor with him very low, but the ceiling is very high. He has ideal athleticism, size, and length you look for in a two-guard, and he has the upside to be a true superstar at the next level. So if you have somebody with that type of upside, it's really hard for them to fall farther than this. So even though the Portland Trailblazers are looking for day one contributors, if Shaedon Sharpe falls here, it might be too hard to pass up, and I could see somebody trading up here. The Oklahoma City Thunder have been heavily linked to this pick. I could see a package with like pick 12 and Lou Dort for pick 7. Maybe that's too much for Oklahoma City to give up, but I think something in that ballpark could happen. So I'm very intrigued to see who ends up picking at 7, and hopefully for Shaedon Sharpe, he goes to a team with a high level of development and a high pedigree. I don't necessarily trust a team like the Blazers wholeheartedly to develop him, but we'll see. Bennedict Mathurin out of Arizona going number 8 to the Pelicans. This is probably the lowest he's going to end up. Mathurin's another guy who I think has a pretty high floor with his shot-making ability, solid perimeter scorer, good defender, good athlete in transition. I could see him going as high as 5. I think 5 to Detroit could happen. 6 to the Pacers could certainly happen. But he goes here at 8 to New Orleans. I think this is a really good pairing of team and player. The Pelicans are looking for guys who can contribute right away because they were a very solid team last year making the playoffs. They've added Zion Williamson back from his injury. So I think Bennedict Mathurin here could make a lot of sense. Another player and team pairing I really like is the Memphis center, Jalen Duren, going to the San Antonio Spurs at 9. I think the Spurs are really going to look for somebody who can be a post presence for them down low. There are some DeJounte Murray trade rumors. I really don't buy that. And I think Jalen Duren here makes a lot of sense for the Spurs, a team who knows how to develop big guys. Jalen Duren's, I believe, the youngest player in this draft class. He doesn't turn 19 until November. He's a little bit undersized, 6'10", 6'11", but he is built physically very well. He already is an NBA body. He's not really a skilled offensive big man, but he does a lot of the dirty work. He's a good rebounder. He's a great shot blocker down low. If he were a little bit more skilled, I could see him going a lot earlier than this, but I do think he's a good rim-running big man. He has great mobility, and even though he doesn't really have the jump shot on offense, I do think with his athleticism, he is fit for the modern NBA. Even if he's not going to stroke it from 25 feet away from the basket, he's somebody who has good touch inside. He's a good enough playmaker for his size, and again, he's somebody who can be a rim runner, a lob threat, and I think with his mobility going along with his big frame, he fits the modern NBA quite well. AJ Griffin out of Duke going to the Wizards. I have Griffin as my 17th player in the class. I'm quite a bit lower on him than others. He did shoot nearly 50% from 3 this year at Duke, but he did take a while to get along. And I think that could be a little bit of an anomaly. He is a very funky shot, and he's not a great shot creator. Most of his threes were off the catch and shoot. And yes, it is good to have guys who can shoot well off the catch, but he doesn't really create his own shot that well. He's not a phenomenal defender, so I just don't really get the lottery hype with Griffin, but I do think there is some upside with him. He doesn't have the highest ceiling, but I think at worst he'll be a solid three-point shooter, and I think with his frame and athleticism, there's no reason to expect he won't improve on defense, so I do think he has a pretty high floor, but I don't think I would use a top 10 pick on him. Another guy I'm lower on than others is Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin. He goes 11 here to the New York Knicks. Davis had a great season for the Badgers this past year, but he was quite inefficient. I do think he is a little bit more promising on defense than people realize, and he had some really tough shots last year, but I think the shot selection at times was a little bit inconsistent. He's not, per se, a super high-level athlete or somebody who is super explosive. And again, I think with his scoring, although he made some really impressive shots last year, he also wasn't the most efficient, as I just said. So that, along with not a great playmaking ability, I have him a little bit lower than others as well, but I do think he'll fit that New York vibe. I think he fits a big market personality, and I think he's a Tom Thibodeau guy, so I think the Knicks are going to like him. The OKC Thunder are back on the clock here at 12. They go with Ousmane Dieng. He's a French forward who played in New Zealand last year. Dieng is interesting because he's really raw, but the ceiling with him is sky high, and I don't necessarily think it's because of his athleticism. He's a solid athlete, but I don't think it's necessarily elite. But it's more so the skills that he's flashed as a ball handler, as somebody who can create his own shot, as somebody who's versatile on the defensive end of the floor. Certainly raw, but he is one of the youngest players in this draft class. And as we talked about with Chet Holmgren, Oklahoma City can afford to take a big swing on a guy like Dieng because they have so many high picks coming up within the next few seasons. So I think this pick could make sense here in the late lottery for Oklahoma City. The Charlotte Hornets have 2 of the next 3 selections. They start with selecting Malachi Branham, the wing out of Ohio State. I think Branham's one of the more underrated players in this draft class, and I think he's going to go a little bit earlier than people expect. I think most mock drafts have had him in the late teens, early 20s, but I could see him as high here as the late lottery, and I think this is appropriate range for him as he comes in as my number 12 ranked player in the class, ahead of guys like A.J. Griffin and Johnny Davis. I think Malachi Branham has a really good feel for the game. He's a very talented scorer. And the Charlotte Hornets are in an interesting spot because they've got guys like Miles Bridges who are going to be free agents. Gordon Hayward's been a name that they've floated up in trade talks. So I think they have a bigger need on the wing than people realize. And I think Malachi Branham is a better player than people think. I think he's going to be a really, really good pro. Ochai Agbaji from the national championship winning Kansas Jayhawks, Rock Chalk. He goes here at 14 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's a senior, one of the older players in the class, coming at 22 years old. But as a Kansas fan who's followed really his entire collegiate career, I can tell you that Agbaji has really improved each season he's been with the Jayhawks. Last year winning the Big 12 Player of the Year, and again being the best player on the national championship winning team. Agbaji is an explosive athlete who can really score the ball well from all 3 levels. He shot the ball very well from 3 last season, and I think with his size and length, gives him a lot of defensive upside. He's going to be a good 3-and-D guy right away as soon as he steps on an NBA floor, and I think the Cleveland Cavaliers, with their very talented young core, they already have their great elite pieces, guys like Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, who can be the foundational stars. Why not get somebody who can be a good role player type in Ochai Agbaji? Mark Williams, the center out of Duke, to the Charlotte Hornets. Williams has unbelievable size and length, which certainly goes to his advantage. I don't think he has the mobility or the quickness as a guy like Jalen Duren, which is why he's going to go ahead of Williams. But the Charlotte Hornets need some size really, really bad. They have not had a good center in a long time. So Mark Williams, again, not necessarily somebody who's skilled on offense, but he'll provide a big presence down low on defense. Another guy with an NBA-level frame and super long arms. So I think that pick would make a lot of sense here for the Hornets. Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor to the Hawks. If he falls here, Atlanta should run this card up. And chances are Sohan will end up in the lottery. But if he doesn't, the Hawks should scoop him up here at 16. Sohan's numbers won't wow you, but he's somebody who's going to provide a ton of versatility on both ends of the floor, particularly defensively. I think his shot has a ways to improve, but there's certainly something there, and he wasn't a horrible shooter last year at Baylor. This is a guy who I think will be able to make an immediate winning impact despite being one of the younger players in the draft class. So that's why I'm as high on him as I am, and I think the Hawks here at 16 would be a great fit. Kennedy Chandler, the point guard out of Tennessee, to the Rockets here at 17. I don't think I've seen Chandler higher than this, but he's another guy who I think is going to go a little bit earlier than people expect. He's not the biggest, only around 6 foot, 6'1", but he is super quick. He's a good defender for his size, quick hands, which can lead to steals, and he's going to blow right by you. You're not going to catch him in transition. Very solid athlete. He's a really good playmaker as well. Houston has a lot of score-first guards with guys like Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. Porter has shown a lot of improvements through his career as a playmaker, but getting somebody in Kennedy Chandler who can create his own offense as well for his teammates, I think Chandler is one of the more underrated players in this class as well. Tari Eason out of Louisiana State University going to the Bulls. He's like the perfect glue guy. Excellent versatility on defense. He was LSU's best offensive player last year, scoring 17 a game with 3-point shooting upside. I don't see him as anybody who's going to be a lead offensive scorer, but he is the perfect glue guy on a playoff team like the Chicago Bulls. So I think this would be a really, really strong pick for them here towards the latter portion of the first round. The Minnesota Timberwolves have certainly one of the brighter futures in the NBA, and it's going to get even brighter tonight as they go with Ty Washington, the point guard out of Kentucky, a player who goes later than I think he should, coming in as my number 11 overall player in the class. D'Angelo Russell has been floated around in trade rumors. I don't think the Timberwolves should trade him. I think D'Angelo Russell is a more important piece for that team than people realize, and I do think him and Ty Washington could really coexist in that backcourt because I think both players have solid on and off ball ability. Washington was inconsistent as a passer last year, but had some really good moments, including breaking John Wall's assist record in a game. And Washington did miss some time last year. Kentucky certainly was not the same team without him, but I think he's a gifted guard, particularly on the offensive end, good scorer as well. And again, somebody who can play on and off the ball. I think the Timberwolves are really going to like him. A name who has really risen up boards as of recently is Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara. He goes to the San Antonio Spurs here at 20. This is somebody who does a great job of creating his own shot. Unbelievable wingspan, coming in at around 6'6" with nearly 7'3" arms. He's a really solid shooter as well. Not some crazy athlete, but I think with his shot selection, his shooting ability, and his size and length, which will certainly help him on the defensive end of the floor, he's going to be a really, really good pro. He comes in as my 16th overall player. Again, higher than guys like A.J. Griffin and Johnny Davis. So I think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Spurs. They have another first-round pick at 25 as well. The Denver Nuggets get Bryce McGowens out of Nebraska. I think McGowens last year didn't really get to live up to his full potential, mainly because he was on a very bad basketball team where he was really forced to do so much of the work, which led to him being quite inefficient. But McGowan certainly has a lot of offensive upside, and the Denver Nuggets have a good history of drafting players who were super highly regarded at high school and maybe didn't perform as well in college or have been slipping for other reasons. Look at guys like Bol Bol, Michael Porter Jr., and others. I think Bryce McGowens could be added to that list. Dalen Terry to the Memphis Grizzlies is one of my favorite fits. I don't really know what position to put for him because he can really guard the 1 through the 4. He's another guy who's not going to wow you with his numbers, but he's the perfect role player. And I think on a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who already has their franchise guy in John Morant, who already has very good compliments in guys like Jaren Jackson and Desmond Bane, why not add another guy with great athleticism and length, particularly which would help him on defense, in a guy like Dalen Terry, who has some shades of a guy like Kyle Anderson, who the Grizzlies already have. Jaden Hardy to the 76ers here at 23 from the G League Ignite. I just get Daryl Morey vibes with Jaden Hardy, who at the beginning of the season looked like a candidate for the number 1 overall pick. He was very inefficient this season in the G League. I'm a little bit more worried about his inefficiency compared to a guy like Bryce McGowens because Jaden Hardy had NBA-level prospects on his team. Dyson Daniels was already off the board. Marshawn Beauchamp, as you'll see, is about to go, amongst with other guys like Michael Foster and Scoot Henderson, who's going to be a super high draft pick next year. So Jaden Hardy was pretty much tasked with being the lead scorer, and although he scored a lot, he also missed a lot of shots. So I would say I'm a little bit more concerned about that with him than McGowens. But Hardy has elite offensive upside, and the Sixers need somebody who can just go off the bench and give them buckets. And I think that's exactly what Jaden Hardy will be able to do. There's a good shot this pick does not stay with the 76ers. Apparently, they are really trying to package this pick along with a guy like Matisse Thybulle to go out and maybe get more of a proven veteran or clear up money. I know they really want PJ Tucker. So I don't think this pick does stay in the hands of the 76ers, but if it does, look out for a guy like Jaden Hardy. Marshawn Beauchamp goes here at 24 to the Bucks. Beauchamp is interesting because he's kind of a late bloomer. He's a little bit older than all these other G League guys and sort of rose out of nowhere, but he had a really solid season last year with the G League Ignite, and I think he's somebody who can provide good value on both ends of the floor and could be a good piece off the bench for a championship contender like the Bucks. I think if this mock draft were to actually happen, one of the biggest winners would have to be the San Antonio Spurs. They got Jalen Duren at 9, Jalen Williams at 20, and now they get Nikola Jovic from Mega Mozart. He is part Serbian, part British, I believe. I would have to fact check on that one. But Jovic is a very interesting player. I know everybody probably wants him to end up on the Denver Nuggets for obvious reasons. But this is a guy who's a really solid playmaker for his size, sort of a point forward, who has a really solid jump shot. Although his mechanics are a little bit questionable, the shot goes in. We know the Spurs like their foreign guys, so he'll sort of fit that billing. EJ Liddell out of Ohio State to the Rockets. He's probably going to go earlier than this, but this is just sort of how the board played out. I could certainly see a scenario where like EJ Liddell goes at 17 and then Kennedy Chandler, who I had them picked there, goes at 26. You could hypothetically swap those guys. I have Liddell as the 20th ranked player in the class. A really good season last year at Ohio State. He is an NBA body, and he could, again, be a little bit of a tweener. Does he have the quickness to defend the perimeter? Does he have the size to bang down low? So I think that's a question with him, but he's a really well-rounded player, and I think the Rockets may want to look for a high floor guy who has some good defense and is a proven leader who can help shift that culture. Christian Koloko out of Arizona to the Miami Heat. Koloko's a very interesting player because he had a very sort of traditional big role last year, but I do think he has the shooting ability and the versatility to provide value on the perimeter as well. He's an unbelievable shot blocker and a great defender down low, and he'll give a good change of pace for Bam Adebayo, who already provides that as well. The defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors get Walker Kessler, the big man out of Auburn, another phenomenal shot-blocking defensive center. The one issue with the Warriors roster right now is size. Kevon Looney gave them some great minutes in the postseason, but it's not really clear what Looney's future is in Golden State. And even if they keep him, they're going to need another guy who can provide good size. Looney's only about 6'8", 6'9", so now you're getting a true 7-footer who can give you solid minutes as an elite defender down low and has good enough touch offensively. I think this is definitely one of the best fits in this draft class. Caleb Houston out of Michigan goes to the Memphis Grizzlies. Houston was a top recruit and really did not live up to expectations, but he's somebody who has good length, athleticism. He has a solid shot. And I think a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who already had a pick earlier, they want to take a shot on upside for a guy like Caleb Houston. Another player with high upside is Kendall Brown. He's one of the freakiest athletes in the entire draft class, going to the Denver Nuggets here at pick 30. Again, the Nuggets like guys who are big names, who have the upside, like Bryce McGowan's earlier, and now Kendall Brown. Hopefully for Denver, one of these two players pans out, and this would be a good draft for them. As a Kansas fan, I'm really hoping Christian Braun sneaks into the late first round on a contending team like Miami, Golden State, Memphis, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. I think that'd be a really good spot for him because he's a guy who really impacts winning and does a lot of things well. But there were just better fits with those teams. He ends up here to Indiana. I know he had a pre-draft workout with the Pacers, so clearly they have some interest in him. Brown is the type of guy who plays with an edge. He has a swagger to him, and I think whoever drafts him, their fan base is going to love him. He doesn't have ideal length, but he has good athleticism. He's good off the catch and shoot, pretty solid defender as well. So he's going to give you high-energy minutes off the bench, and I think he's going to be a really good role player in the NBA. Jean Montero from Overtime Elite. I believe this would be the first Overtime Elite player drafted, technically ever, to the Orlando Magic here at 32. The Magic have a ton of talented guards. They drafted Jalen Suggs last year. They have Markelle Fultz. They have plenty of other guys as well. So they don't really need a guard, but in the second round, you're drafting for value. You're drafting for upside. Montero is a great ball handler. He's a very solid scorer. I think he needs to improve a little bit as a playmaker, but I do think the upside is certainly there. So I think he's going to be an interesting player at the next level. The Toronto Raptors are one of those organizations where even if they make a questionable pick on paper, you give them the benefit of the doubt because Masai Ujiri and company knows what they are doing. Last year, they shocked the world by picking Scotty Barnes over Jalen Suggs, which nobody, myself included, saw coming at all, and clearly that looks like a great move. Here they go with Max Christie, the wing out of Michigan State. He had a disappointing freshman season, but he has good 3-and-D upside with a high level of athleticism. Even though I have him as my 51st player on the board, if Toronto picks him, chances are he's going to be better than the 51st player in the class. Wendell Moore out of Duke goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is great value. Wendell Moore is super well-rounded. He does everything right. I think kind of like Christian Braun, he would make a lot of sense in the late first round to one of those championship contenders, but again, there were slightly better fits. I think Moore is going to be a phenomenal pro, and the Thunder have already taken two huge swings on upside with Chet Holmgren and Ousmane Dieng. So why not go for somebody who has a higher floor in Wendell Moore, who you know is going to be a good player? I know the Thunder have been linked to Wendell Moore, so clearly they like him. Josh Minott out of Memphis to the Orlando Magic. A big swing for upside here for the Orlando Magic, who focused on floor with their number 1 overall pick in Jabari Smith. So now they take a big swing here in Josh Minott, who didn't have a great freshman season at Memphis, but the reason why teams really like him is because of the athletic upside, the defensive versatility. He's going to be a very intriguing pro at the next level. And the Pistons draft David Roddy, the big wing out of Colorado State. He's my first player not ranked. I ranked 60 players. He didn't make my top 60, but he had a great season last year for Colorado State. He was their best player on a really good team. They were the 6th seed last year, nearly beat Michigan in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Roddy's a big guy. He's like 250, 6'5". He's built like a linebacker. Again, he's a little bit of a tweener because he has size to bang low, but he doesn't have the ideal height or length. I don't think he has the quickness you look for on the perimeter, but I do think someone's going to draft him for his grit and somebody who can give you good energy minutes off the bench. The Sacramento Kings here at 37 select Hugo Besson. He's a big guard playing for the New Zealand Breakers, the same team that Ousmane Dieng played for this past season. Besson has a really good feel for the game. I think he's a little bit raw. He needs to improve as a playmaker, needs to improve his efficiency, but I think he's an intriguing player who could very well be a good pro. Jalen Williams, the center out of Arkansas, goes to the Spurs. I did not intentionally have the Spurs drafting both Jalen Williamses. It just happened to be that way. So there might be a little bit of confusion drafting the Jalen Williams from Santa Clara and now the Jalen Williams of Arkansas, but we're going to make it work. Jalen Williams is a super high-energy guy. He provides good size and length and was a really solid defensive player last year for the Razorbacks. He's not going to give you much value as a scorer, but he provides more size. They already drafted Jalen Duren today, so why not add some more size here with Jalen Williams? The Spurs have drafted 3 players named Jalen, and again, 2 of them are Jalen Williams, which is, again, kind of odd, but we're going to roll with it. Andrew Nembhard, the point guard out of Gonzaga to the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was one of the biggest winners of the NBA Draft Combine. This is not somebody with a super high ceiling, but the Cavs are drafting him for what he can provide right away as a good depth point guard off the bench. So the Cavs aren't taking big swings with their top 2 picks, getting Nembhard and Ochai Agbaji, but they're getting 2 players who I think are going to be really solid role players for them. Blake Wesley, the 2-guard out of Notre Dame to the Timberwolves. I know a lot of people think he's going to be a first-round pick. I'm not quite as sure about it. He's a raw player who certainly has upside, but I see him more as an early second-round guy. I think that's where he should end up, and I think he has a higher chance of being a second-round pick than people realize. Israel Kamagate, a French center, goes to the Pelicans here at 41. New Orleans could use some more size, and Kamagate has some solid upside, so I think they may be intrigued by him here. And then Dom Barlow, another overtime elite player to the Knicks. Again, didn't quite crack my top 60, but I think the Knicks are going to be intrigued by him. He's a very well-rounded player, doesn't have any major weaknesses to his game, although he doesn't really have any major strengths either. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how he ends up. Really, all the overtime elite guys in particular, to see if that's really a good option for prospects going forward. I know they've got a few highly projected picks next year, so we'll probably be able to more so tell then, but we'll see how they've been able to develop guys like Barlow, Jean Montero, and others who entered the NBA in this year's class. The Los Angeles Clippers go with Trevor Keels, the wing out of Duke. He had some solid moments for them as a freshman last year. Wasn't all that consistent. The Clippers have shown they're willing to draft for upside, even if there's inconsistency with B.J. Boston last year, who outperformed his draft selection. So we'll see if that could be the case here with Keels. Iverson Molinar out of Mississippi State goes to the Atlanta Hawks. This is somebody who can be a solid scorer off the bench for them. I think they could use some more scoring with their backup guards. J.D. Davison out of Alabama to the Hornets. He's a little bit undersized, but he is a freakish athlete. Didn't have a great season last year at Alabama, but the Hornets are drafting him based on his athletic potential. Jake LaRavia out of Wake Forest goes to the Blazers. Another guy who I think a lot of people are expecting to go earlier, could possibly be a first-round pick. This is somebody with good versatility, but again, could be another tweener, 6'8", 227. He doesn't really have the quickness to play on the perimeter. Will he have the size to match up with bigs? So that's sort of the question with him. Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers goes to the Grizzlies. I think Harper is going to be a really solid pro. He could be someone who's a pretty high-floor guy, contributes early off the bench for the Memphis Grizzlies. And Justin Lewis out of Marquette to the Timberwolves here at 48. One of the better value picks, in my opinion, through the draft. He has good size and length with a wingspan nearly at 7'3". He's a solid three-point shooter who has good physicality. I think he does have enough quickness to provide versatility on the defensive end of the floor. And I think this is somebody who has a pretty high floor, and he'll be a good contributor pretty early on. Earlier today, the Cleveland Cavaliers acquired the 49th pick from the Sacramento Kings in exchange for the draft rights of Sasha Vezenikov. So the Cavs now have this pick. Clearly, they have a plan if they're moving up here. They've drafted two very high floor players with Andrew Nembhard and Ochai Agbaji. So now they go for the big swing with Peyton Watson. If you look at his numbers last year, you might puke a little bit. Watson was not a great player last year for UCLA at all. I was very surprised to see him stay in the draft. But the Cavs are drafting for upside here, and since they've drafted two high floor players already, why not take a big swing? Watson has great athleticism, he has great length. Didn't really pan out last year with the Bruins, but he might be a better pro than college player. Gabriel Procida from Italia going to the Minnesota Timberwolves here at 50. The Timberwolves have, I think, 3 second-rounders this year, so they may want to draft a foreign guy who could be a good draft and stats guy. Procida has good upside as a shooter and a perimeter defender at the next level. One of the most polarizing players in this class for me is Patrick Baldwin Jr. out of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He ends up here at 51 of the Warriors. I have no clue what his range is. Could he go in the late first round? Could he go all the way down here in the second round? I think this is more so where he belongs. Baldwin was a very high recruit coming out of high school. I think he certainly would have been better off going to a bigger program where he could have been a solid second or third option. He could have looked pretty good and maybe been a lottery pick. He went to Milwaukee where he was supposed to be the focal point, and it just didn't really work out. At the Combine, he did not test well at all, which really led to this drop for me. I was sort of willing to disregard the freshman season at Milwaukee just because it was a bad situation, but with poor production in college and now poor athletic testing at the Combine, I didn't really feel justified having him in my top 50. He's my 53rd overall player. The upside is certainly there as a solid role player. He has good shooting mechanics. He can hit the three ball. He has good length you look for on defense. Why not a team like the Golden State Warriors take a shot on him and hope to develop him? Ryan Rollins, a combo guard out of Toledo, going to the New Orleans Pelicans. He had a very solid season last year for the Rockets, one of the best players in the MAC. So now the Pelicans are going to hope for some more solid guard depth with him. Kofi Cockburn, the big center out of Illinois, goes to the Celtics. Kofi Cockburn would be a very high draft pick about 25 years ago. He is your big, physical, 7-foot, 260-pound bruising center who isn't going to give you much outside the paint, but he is a physical presence. I like the fit in Boston because this way you can try to combat big physical centers in the Eastern Conference like Joel Embiid, to an extent Bam Adebayo. So the Celtics are hoping he could be a type of guy who gives you 10, 15 minutes off the bench and makes it harder for some of those elite big men. Moussa Diabate out of Michigan goes to the Wizards, another guy who didn't have a great freshman season, but you're drafting him for upside. That's a common theme here with some of these high recruits who didn't pan out, like Caleb Houston, Max Christie, Patrick Baldwin, Peyton Watson. All of those guys had disappointing freshman seasons, but they're still getting drafted because of the athletic upside. Moussa Diabate as well, going to the Wizards here at 54. So at 55, the Warriors select Scottie Pippen Jr., the point guard out of Vanderbilt. He is, of course, related to Scottie Pippen, the great Chicago Bull. Pippen's an intriguing player. I think there's a lot to like with him, and I do think he should get drafted, in my opinion. Why not a team like the Golden State Warriors, who may be looking for some solid guard depth? Michael Foster from the G League Ignite goes to the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was a highly regarded recruit who didn't quite have the season he was hoping for with the G League Ignite, but I do think some team may want to draft him here based off of upside. Trevion Williams out of Purdue to the Blazers. He's not the most physically mobile center. He doesn't have the athleticism you look for, but he's highly skilled. He's a really good passer, and I think with his NBA type of skills, somebody's going to draft him, even if he doesn't have the NBA type of length or athleticism. And then Mr. Irrelevant at 58, the Pacers go with Aminu Muhammad out of Georgetown, a talented freshman who, again, Georgetown was really bad last year. You got to keep that in mind. I think Muhammad is one of the more slept-on players in this draft class, and I could really see him carving out a solid career for himself. So I think he should certainly get drafted here, and this would be a good value pick for the Pacers, who've had a really good draft today with Dyson Daniels, Christian Braun, and Aminu Muhammad. That would be easily one of the best draft classes of this year's draft. The other two picks in the second round that we skipped over belong to the Bucks and the Heat. They were forfeited. The Heat were tampering last year. It might have been, I think, related to Lonzo Ball. I'm not entirely sure. And then the Bucks with Bogdan Bogdanovic a couple years back. So those teams lost for your second round picks. They will not be making a selection here in the second round of the draft. So that's going to wrap up the video. Let me know what you thought of my mock draft down below in the comments section. Who do you want your team to draft tonight? I know who I want. Jaden Ivey to the Detroit Pistons. Make it happen. Peace out.